Hey, everybody. So we're going to talk about Iraq and the Iraq-Iran relationship. The last week or so has seen this flurry of diplomatic activity between Iraq and Iran. And Iraq is an interesting case. They're one of the only Shiite majority countries in the world. They also have this this big border with Iran. And there's also, because of the Shiite majority, but not only because of that, there's a lot of influence of Iran in Iraq. At the same time, Iraq is in the American orbit. There's a significant military presence there of the United States, and more. And recently, there was a state visit between the new Iraqi head of state with President Trump in Washington. And similar to what's going on in Lebanon, the Americans have been pressuring the Iraqis to disarm these Iranian-backed militias. Okay, so there's a lot going on with Iraq and Iran. It's a very important piece of the puzzle, and it relates directly to American policy right now in with the economic sanctions regime, this new economic D-Day that's been announced, and we're going to get into all of that in this video. Okay, so let's get to the headlines of what's been going on, and we'll make the picture clear. There's a lot happening. Here we go. Iraq delays deadline for Iran-backed Shiite militias to hand over weapons. So let's back up. There's this kind of agreement, sort of. It's not a written agreement that the U.S. would finally withdraw all of its military presence from Iraq by the end of September, and Iraqi militias would also disarm. Okay, and we talked about this a while around the time of the visit between Trump and Ziadi or Zaidi, whatever his name is, the new Iraqi head of state. We talked about this around that time, that he was arguing that these militias, the resistance, that's what they call themselves, the Iran-backed militias, have no reason to have weapons if the American forces are gone, because who were they trying to attack? In any event, the disarming of the militias, similar to the Lebanon situation but not the same, is a big issue now. Iraq trying to gain its sovereignty from the influence of Iran. So let's see what it says in this article. And this is from 2 days ago. A senior Iraqi official on Sunday pushed back a September 30th deadline for pro-Iran armed factions to hand over their weapons without offering an explanation for the move or providing a new date. Well, the explanation is going to become clear. Stay tuned. Iraq has come under pressure from the United States to rein in armed factions, particularly those close to Iran. For several months, Iraq's government has stood by its deadline. Okay, so they had set this deadline. September 30th is the deadline. By then, all of the non-state militias, all of these independent militias, and there's a bunch of them in Iraq, Iraq's a mess, they were all going to disarm. But on Sunday, the security advisor to the prime minister, Qasim al-Araji, told state media the process would only begin at the end of next month. Okay. September 30th is the date for the international coalition to depart, meaning the Americans, not the deadline to hand over weapons, Araji told the Al-Iraqiya broadcaster, referring to the coalition of U.S.-led forces. September 30th, he said, was the date for the international coalition to end its presence, not the deadline for armed factions. Perhaps people are confusing the two. Since taking office in May, Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi, that's the new head of state, Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi has pledged to ensure the armed factions that emerged in the years that followed the U.S.-led invasion hand over their weapons to the state. While some factions have in recent weeks said they would join state institutions, others, and particularly those closer to Iran, are refusing. Surprise, surprise. Kind of similar to, Hezbollah, Hamas. The situation is extremely complicated, a government official told AFP, requesting anonymity because he was not authorized to speak on the matter. The government is insisting on closing the weapons file, but faction leaders are determined to hold on to their weapons because they believe disarming would serve Israel and the United States. The most powerful armed factions in Iraq include Kataib Hezbollah, a part of Iran's so-called axis of resistance against the U.S. and Israel. Saudi Arabia, a close ally of the U.S., has also accused armed groups in Iraq of launching attacks against it. Another Iraqi source told AFP that Iran views its proxies in the region, especially in Iraq, as a as a source of strength it refuses to give up. Look, let me pull back the camera and just talk about this regional issue, because it really is the same thing. See, what do you have? You have these militias, these terrorist militias backed by the Iranians, but not only by the Iranians. Hamas has other backers, but you have these terrorist militias that get into power roles. And now everyone wants them to disarm. They're not going to disarm. Okay, none of these militias are going to hand over their weapons and not have a weapon on them and just be disarmed. There is zero chance that they're going to do this. Okay, so what does it all mean? What's all this dynamic? So look at Lebanon's the easiest case to discuss. You have this government that openly says it wants to disarm Hezbollah, but it's never going to do anything about it. When Israel fights Hezbollah, they attack Israel. They pretend that they're disarming them, but they're really not, because really there's popular support for these militias. Okay? Now let's take a look at Gaza. Hamas is never going to hand over their weapons. Ever, ever, ever. They're not going to lay them down. But they say that they're going to disarm, and everyone says they want them disarmed. And yet when Israel attacks Hamas guys, which is the only way to disarm them, everyone says Israel's carrying out airstrikes against Gaza, because no one actually wants to disarm them. And then you have the Iraqi militias. Same thing. The official government position is we're going to disarm the militias. America wants them disarmed. No one's going to disarm them, because there's no way to disarm militias. There is only defeating them. And no one's interested in defeating these guys. No one's interested in fighting them. No one's interested in actually removing them. This is the problem throughout the Middle East. But there's a whole lot more to this Iraq story. Okay, so I want to paint you a broader picture of what is going on with Iraq and how it relates to this war. So let's take a look at a few more headlines. This is an interesting one. Iraq summons Iran envoy. This is from today. Over Persian Gulf post, Baghdad name origins, what to know. Okay, so what is this? This is a really bizarre story. I mean, to those of us in the West, we're like, what on earth is this? But it's a big story today in the Arab world. Here we go. So look what happened. In the past week, Iranian officials and embassies made controversial posts involving the name of the body of water separating Iran from the Arabian Peninsula and the origin of the names of Iraq and Baghdad. During his visit to Baghdad, that's in Iraq, of course, last week, a week ago, Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf posted a photograph on X of himself with a map of the region labeled the Persian Gulf. Okay, now why is that so controversial? Find out. Well, let me just tell you, it's going to explain it, but we think of it as the Persian Gulf, like the inside of the Strait of Hormuz there, we call it the Persian Gulf. The Arab countries do not call it the Persian Gulf. They call it the Arabian Gulf, or the Gulf of Arabia, because it borders, it separates between Persia and the Arabian Peninsula. So Ghalibaf posts this picture while he's visiting Iraq of himself with the word Persian Gulf clearly written there. Iraqi Parliament Speaker Haibat al-Halbusi responded to Ghalibaf's post the following day, putting up his own photo in front of the same map bearing Arabian Gulf. Okay? Now, this might seem silly, but it's not. There's a very serious underlying meta-narrative, shall we say, going on here. The public exchange continued as the Iranian embassy in Kenya shared Halbusi's post and claimed that Iraq is a Persian word meaning plain or lowland, and that Baghdad is also a Persian name meaning God-given. Meaning, so here's what happens. Ghalibaf posts a picture, it says Persian Gulf. That's offensive to Iraq, or to the Arabian countries in general. But Iraq is now stepping up and flexing its muscles and pushing back. That's part of the narrative here. And so you have this Iraqi diplomat, the Iraqi parliament speaker, pushing back against Ghalibaf and saying, no, it's called the Arabian Gulf. The Iranian embassy in Kenya then mocks the Iraqis by pointing out that the word Iraq and the word Baghdad are Persian. The embassy later deleted the post in response to backlash. Iran and Arab Gulf countries have been entangled in a decades-old row over the name, While the Persian Gulf is the internationally recognized name of the body of water, Gulf and other Arab governments refer to it as the Arabian Gulf. The term Arabian Gulf has been used by Arab states since the rise of Pan-Arabism in the 1960s. Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, and the UAE all border the Gulf and collectively have about 3,500 kilometers of coastline along it. Iran's coastline amounts to only 1,500 kilometers. In January 2023, Iran summoned Iraq's ambassador to Tehran, Nasir Abdul Mohsen Abdullah, to protest Baghdad's use of the term Arabian Gulf during an Asian soccer event held in Iraq's southern city of Basra. So this is they consider this a serious issue. But what's the meta narrative here? We'll see in the next piece. So this is coverage of the same event in the Arab Weekly. And look how they cover it. Iraq summoned Iran's ambassador on Wednesday over maps and other material published by Iranian diplomatic missions that Baghdad said required clarification and risked inflaming sensitivities over Iraqi sovereignty and national identity. Foreign ministry officials summoned Ambassador Mohammad Kazem al-Sadek after official Iranian diplomatic accounts circulated maps and posts, and this is the Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf thing. The Iraqi objection was fueled by several pieces of material, including posts discussing the origin of the names of Iraq and Baghdad and a map using the term Persian Gulf. The publications prompted criticism in Iraq, where the issue was viewed by some as extending beyond the long-standing dispute over Gulf terminology into questions of national history and identity. Now we're getting into it. The episode comes at a sensitive point in relations between the neighboring countries, with Baghdad seeking to maintain close political, economic, and security ties with Tehran. They want to have a good relationship with Iran, while facing continuing debate over the extent of Iranian influence in Iraq. Iran has extensive links with Iraq through trade, energy, political parties. Like I said, there's basically the ruling bloc in the Iraqi parliament is this coalition of Shiite parties. They operate as a bloc. Okay, so and armed groups. So Iran has a lot of influence there. While successive Iraqi governments have sought to prevent the country from becoming an arena for confrontation between Tehran and its regional and international rivals, which is exactly how Iran wants to use Iraq. They have these proxy militias there that fight their battles for them, attacking Israel. Iraq has been one of the fronts in the war that Israel's been fighting since October 7th. It doesn't get as much press, but also currently attacking Saudi Arabia. Okay. Officials from both sides also discussed strengthening bilateral political, economic, and security cooperation and increasing coordination through international organizations. The dispute over the Gulf's name has also exposed a wider regional fault line. Iran officially uses Persian Gulf, while Arab states use Arabian Gulf, making the terminology a politically charged issue well beyond Iraq. For Baghdad, however, the more sensitive element was the inclusion of the references to Iraqi cities, territory, and history in material issued by official representatives of another state. The dispute comes amid a broader reassessment in Iraq of the country's relationship with Tehran, including questions over Iran-backed armed factions and the degree to which external actors should influence Iraqi political and security decisions. You see, that's what this is really about. This is about Iraqi sovereignty. See, Iran sees Iraq as as the whole country. It's kind of like theirs. It's Shiite, and they're the big Shiite headquarters in the world, and it's Shiite, and they have their Iraq. They have this Shiite majority in the parliament that they basically control with a wink and a nudge. They have their militias that are very powerful, that are similar to Hezbollah, but not quite to the same extent, are a very powerful force in Iraq. And, you know, when they did Khamenei's funeral, it actually went into Iraq for part of the funeral. So like they kind of they're always messaging that Iraq is really within their sphere of influence. And Iraq is trying, there's this internal struggle going on in Iraq over how much influence Iran should have. Baghdad has also been attempting to position itself as a regional mediator while maintaining working relationships with Iran, Gulf Arab states, Turkey, and the United States. That policy requires Iraq to preserve its ties with Tehran while demonstrating that those ties do not amount to acceptance of external influence over its sovereignty. So it's got this balancing act going on, trying to they don't want to have a bad relationship with Tehran. They need a good relationship with Tehran in order to have cohesion at home, because you have so many pro-Iran people, both in the parliament and militias and people in the country, Shiites. The swift removal of the disputed publications suggests both sides have an interest in preventing the incident from escalating. But the summons sends a clear message from Baghdad. Remember, summoning, this is how the article started, that in Baghdad they summoned the Iranian ambassador, that Iraq intends to draw a firmer line around how Iraqi territory, history, and national symbols are represented by foreign diplomatic missions. The incident is unlikely by itself to fundamentally alter Iraqi-Iranian relations. It does, however, illustrate the increasingly sensitive political environment in which Baghdad is attempting to balance strategic cooperation with Iran against a growing insistence on an independent Iraqi national identity. So you see that this bizarre little story about a spat over what to call the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf is actually about something much deeper. Meanwhile, Iraq, and this video is really all about the tightrope that Iraq is walking. Look at this. This is from 2 days ago. Iraq proposes joint security council between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Okay, let's put this in context. Right now, there are Iraqi-backed militias that have been attacking Saudi Arabia. Okay? The Saudis are adversaries of the Iranians. They have been for a long time. It's been an on and off, but mostly off relationship. And Iraq is kind of caught between them. And look what they're trying to do. Iraq has proposed creating a joint security council between Iran and Saudi Arabia. A senior Iraqi official said Sunday, citing a crisis of trust between the two regional powers. Now, Saudi Arabia just signed that pact with Pakistan and Turkey also. Let's keep that in mind. Qasim al-Araji, national security advisor to the Iraqi prime minister, said Baghdad had presented the proposal to both Tehran and Riyadh. The problem between the two countries is a crisis of trust, he said. He gave no further details on the proposed mechanism, while neither Iran nor Saudi Arabia immediately commented. He also said that bringing all weapons under state control was a purely Iraqi strategic decision. In other words, Iran should stay out of it. Okay? But look what it says here. On July 27th, a month ago, Saudi Arabia said it intercepted and destroyed several drones launched from Iraqi territory that attempted to target oil facilities in the eastern province of Riyadh. Riyadh blamed Iran-affiliated militias for the attacks and said it reserved the right to respond. In other words, that's part of the crisis here, that Saudi Arabia has basically said to Iraq, look, you've got this Iranian-backed militias. They're attacking us. You better rein them in, or we're going to hold you responsible. So that's also happening here. All right. Visiting Iraq, Iran's parliament speaker hails new order in the region. This is from a week ago. This is the famous Ghalibaf visit that we talked about, where he put out a picture of the Persian Gulf, right? So during that, this is a report on that visit from France 24. Ghalibaf's trip comes at a time when Iraq is facing American pressure to disarm factions close to Tehran, which wield significant political influence in Iraq. Speaking from the site near Baghdad airport, where Qasem Soleimani was killed in 2020, Ghalibaf said, our trip to Iraq today is aimed at strengthening the new order in the region and strengthening cooperation between all countries. Resistance in Iraq. Now, resistance is a word, whenever you hear it in Iran, from Iranian media or Iranian people, resistance means terrorism. Resistance means the proxy network, okay? Resistance in Iraq is one of the elements of this country's power. Today, resistance has gone beyond the borders of Iran and Iraq and has become global. Ghalibaf is he was scheduled to meet Zaidi, but look what else it says. He was scheduled to meet Zaidi and then hold a meeting with the coordination framework. What's that? That's that block of pro-Iran, of Shiite parties in the Iraqi parliament that basically controls the government. They choose who's going to be the prime minister. So Ghalibaf met with them, the largest bloc in parliament made up of Shia parties with varying degrees of proximity to Tehran. And then as part of his trip, look what he did. On Thursday, Ghalibaf will head to the holy city of Karbala, where he will take part in ceremonies marking 40 days since the funeral of former Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who's not buried there, but he's gonna go there. And this is all, maybe it's just for religious reasons, but it also, like I said before, Iran likes to show that as the leaders of the Shiite world, Iraq is basically under their control. Now, this is from a Kurdish media outlet. Iran presses Iraq against disarming armed groups, sources say. This is from 2 days ago. Senior Iranian officials have privately urged Iraqi leaders not to disarm armed factions aligned with Tehran. During a recent visit to Iraq, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force commander Esmail Qaani. So Esmail Qaani, the head of the Quds Force, Quds Force is the part of the IRGC which manages the proxy network outside of Iran. Okay, so he's like the commander of and the coordinator of the relationships with the Houthis, Iraqi, Hezbollah in Lebanon. Like all of it is managed by the Quds. That's the Quds Force. So the head of the Quds Force was just in Iraq. Ghalibaf was just in Iraq. We'll see more. We oppose disarming the resistance front. We do not want the experiences of Lebanon and Syria to be repeated in Iraq. What are the experiences of Lebanon and Syria? Syria is, Iran used to own Syria before the Assad regime fell, and they lost that. And now they're losing Lebanon because Israel's pounding Hezbollah and destroying them. So he was very open. He visited Iraq and he said, we don't want to lose Iraq. We have our militias here. Iraqi lawmaker Kazim al-Shamari said the government and armed factions had agreed to stop describing the process as disarmament of armed groups. Instead, he said the discussions would focus on ending the fighters' affiliation with independent factions and integrating them into the popular mobilization forces, which are formally part of the Iraq security apparatus. Okay, the popular mobilization forces is this name given to a bunch of different militias in Iraq, terrorist organizations in Iraq, that all kind of are sort of quasi part of the government security forces. Like they're even paid by the Iraqi government, but they're kind of independent militias. Basically what they're saying is we're not going to disarm them. We're not going to disarm you anymore. We're just going to incorporate you into our security apparatus. Al-Shamari said Prime Minister Ali Zaidi had met with representatives of all the relevant armed groups except Kataib Hezbollah, that's the most important one, and had reached what he described as a strong understanding with them. Al-Araji, so that's the national security advisor. He's the one who said that we're not really going to disarm them by the 30th. That's just when the Americans have to leave. So that's what, right, that just says that here. Iraqi lawmaker Shirwan al-Dubardani separately told Kurdistan 24 that Prime Minister Zaidi's position had softened, that he's not even seeking to disarm them anymore. Iraqi Prime Minister Ali Zaidi's position on disarming the armed groups has now softened. It's no longer as firm as it was before. Several groups had previously resisted surrendering their arms or tied any agreement to the departure of U.S. forces and improvements in Iraq's military capabilities. In other words, this is all a very long-winded way of saying the Iranians, Esmail Qaani, the head of the Quds Force, went in there. He laid down the law. He told all of these Shiite militias there, don't give up your weapons. Meanwhile, the Iraqi government, from the prime minister to the security advisor, are all backing off of the insistence that they disarm. In other words, the disarming of the Iraqi militias is being taken off the table. And then we get to the economic warfare that the U.S. is waging against Iran and where Iraq fits into that. Iraq may show how the U.S. can squeeze Iran's trade partners. This is from yesterday, from Reuters. Iraq could serve as an example of how the United States could carry out its threat to force countries that continue trading with Iran out of the dollar-based financial system. Washington has already sanctioned a host of Iraqi banks accused of doing business with Tehran, though it had avoided measures that would devastate the economy of the strategic ally of both countries. The United States, since its 2003 invasion of Iraq, has held effective control over the country's oil revenue dollars, primarily through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, giving Washington extraordinary leverage over Baghdad's affairs. Let me explain this. After the U.S. invasion of Iraq, when the United States kind of took the place over, all of the oil revenue of Iraq flows through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Okay? So the United States has tremendous power over Iraq that it doesn't even wield over other countries. A rare ally of both the United States and Iran, with more than $100 billion in reserves held in the U.S., you see what I mean? Iraq relies heavily on Washington's goodwill to keep its oil revenues and finances flowing. I mean, think of the tight spot that the Iraqis are in. I just described this whole complex relationship they have with Iran and with these Shiites in their government and these militias that are there, and they're not going to dislodge them. And meanwhile, the Americans are holding all their money and have forces there. Reuters revealed in late 2024 a fuel oil smuggling network generating at least $1 billion a year for Iran and its proxies in Iraq. Other neighbors of Iran involved in similar schemes could face similar scrutiny from Washington. While the U.S. has uniquely strong leverage over Iraq compared with other major trading partners of Iran, the U.S. dollar's status as the linchpin of global trade makes its reach formidable. In April, Reuters reported that the U.S. halted $500 million cash shipment to Iraq and suspended parts of security cooperation to pressure Baghdad over Iran-backed militias. I talked about that in my video back in April. Okay, this is what happened here. There was supposed to be $500 million in cash sent to Iraq. They do a lot with cash there. And the United States held it back. They halted it as a way of holding leverage over Iraq, saying you have to disarm the Iran-backed militias. In January, Washington reportedly threatened senior Iraqi politicians with sanctions, including on oil revenues, should such groups join the next government. And dude, they're joining the next government. Iraq is a mess. Successive U.S. administrations have sought to choke that dollar stream with sanctions on Iraqi banks in recent years, though some of the largest banks were spared. Iraq's current prime minister emerged as a candidate seen as acceptable to the Trump administration, which has pressured Baghdad to curb Iran's influence. Iran has long viewed its neighbor and ally Iraq as an economic lung and wields considerable military, political, and economic influence there. And it talks about how much energy they trade between them. And Iraq has also been an effective sanctions evasion route for Iran. Okay, so last one here. Okay, last one. Look at this one. This is from today. And this is from Iraqi News. President of Iraq's Supreme Judicial Council visits Iran. Now, why is the president of Iraq's judiciary, the head of their judiciary, why is he visiting Iran? The president of Iraq's Supreme Judicial Council, Faik Zaidan, paid a high-profile one-day visit to Tehran on Tuesday, yesterday, to boost cross-border legal cooperation. Cross-border legal cooperation, develop bilateral judicial agreements, and address important security concerns. The meetings focused on aligning judicial protocols and managing shared legal issues. What kind of shared legal issues? We'll find out at the end of the piece. Strengthening legal relations, streamlining judicial procedures, activating cooperative security frameworks, reviewing legislative support for cross-border law enforcement, and addressing border stability and security measures. The Iraqi judicial chief indicated that Iraq will never forget Iran's support during the U.S. war against the country in 2003 and the war against ISIS terrorist groups. Look at that. Thanking Iran for its help against the U.S. and against ISIS, which is, of course, Sunni. And look at the final line. The Iraqi official added that it is important to enhance intelligence cooperation, curb smuggling networks, streamline extradition protocols, and tackle the existence of anti-Iran groups along shared borders. That's what this is about. This is about preventing weapons from coming across from Iraq into anti-Iran militias in Iran. It's about preventing the Kurds who are anti-Iran from getting across. Everything that could help the popular resistance against the Iranian regime that could come across the Iraqi border, that's what this is about. It's about extraditing people who Iran wants extradited to Iran from Iraq that they see as security threats. That's what this is about. Iran is working hard to ensure that it is safe from what it fears most, which is an insurgency against it. And they know that Iraq is a problem area because of the anti-Iran forces that are there and the way that it could be used as a route to traffic weapons into the population in Iran who might want to use them against the regime. So Iraq, bottom line on this whole video, it's gone on way too long, but this is Iraq is in this impossible position. They're on the one hand beholden to the United States, on the other hand they're beholden to Iran and the Shiite militias. Anyway, I don't have a solution to this problem. I'm just updating you. It's a very important piece of the puzzle here, and we'll watch it and see how it unfolds. All right, thanks for watching. If you stayed to the end, God bless you. And please share this video. Please like it. Please drop a comment. Let me know what you think. God bless.